I bought this piece of furniture at a resale shop near my house for only $35. It's pretty banged up, but it is a gorgeous piece of furniture and I feel like it has so much potential. I thoroughly clean my piece using Dixie Belle's White Lightning Cleaner. Once I finish cleaning the inside and the outside, I take a wet rag with some warm water and I just wipe it down so we don't leave any cleaner residue left on the piece. I have this furniture stripper from Green Ease left over from another project. It does take a long time to work, but it's a pretty great furniture stripper. There's a pretty heavy layer of lacquer on top of the wood, so it does take off some of the stain and the entire thing of lacquer, but I did need to leave it on for about 2 hours. But it comes off with such ease, and you can do it indoors. You don't even need to wear a respirator. It's an all-natural product, and then I love their cleaner too. It's just super easy to use. It's only $15. I highly recommend the cleaner. Now I've decided I want to decoupage this piece of furniture, so I need to add a light base to the front and the sides because that's where I'm going to add my decoupage paper. And it doesn't matter what color it is. I'm just putting a light color underneath that paper because the paper is a little bit transparent and you can see through it. Then I need to remove this little piece inside because I cannot close that door. So I just remove it and I add some new holes and I move that a little bit farther back so that the door will close all the way. This is one of my favorite decoupage papers. It's by Dixie Belle Paint Company. It's called Blushing Roses and it's their A1 rice paper. I love the design. I think it's so pretty and it's perfect for this piece of furniture because the paper comes in 3 different sections. So I need to get rid of that white line. I just use a little bit of my water with a brush and I make sure it's nice and wet and then I tear very carefully. I actually have it sped up here so it doesn't look like I'm being very careful, but if it was in real time you would see I'm doing this very carefully so I don't rip the paper all over. Now for my decoupage medium, I'm using Dixie Belle's Clear Coat in Satin. I love this as my glue because it doesn't dry super fast. You get a little bit of working time. And I like to work in small sections. I usually do the sort of like the width of my brush or maybe 2 brushes, but I paint it on in rows. And I like to take my water mister and mist the paper really light, just a light mist so that I have a little bit more pull with the paper. And I use whatever kind of plastic or you can use another piece of tissue paper to rub the decoupage paper on. That's because you don't want to rub it with your hands or you will rub the design off and you can tear it much more easily. If you have some kind of barrier in between, it just goes on much easier. Now, you just take your time and work your way down the piece. That's what I do. Slowly, I'm just making sure that there's minimal wrinkles. There might be a few, which is not a big deal. If there's a ton, then you might want to take the paper off, let it dry, and try again. But if there are some wrinkles, don't worry about it. That's okay. And if you get too many wrinkles when you're done and the paper has already dried, use a heat gun. You don't want to get it too close. You don't want to burn your paper, but heat it up a little bit and you will see those wrinkles shrink. I really liked working on the flat surface on the sides. I was able to add probably 3 rows of my satin clear coat and put it on, and there were hardly any wrinkles. It just went on so smooth on both of the sides. When you have drawers, it's a little bit trickier. Now, I don't add my glue over the top until it is completely dried. So this is the next day and I want to tear the seams between the drawers. And then I'm going to use my satin clear coat and I'm going to do a layer over the decoupage paper. This is where I can fix any of the mistakes, anything that doesn't look right. If the paper's coming up, I can put it on the bottom, but I always wait until that next day where the sealer is completely dry and the decoupage paper is completely dry. I just find it so much easier to work with. When you're working with wet decoupage paper and you're trying to cut the seams in between the drawers, a lot of tearing happens. So if you need to wait. I wait every single time. Here I'm adding my satin clear coat and I'm folding that paper under. Now I'm ready to paint in the sides. I'm using Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint in the color Cobblestone. Now if I had to do this all over again, I would originally, instead of using Cobblestone, I would use the color Burlap. I do end up going back with Burlap, and you'll see that in a little bit, because I feel like Burlap is just a little bit warmer. Cobblestone is a gorgeous color, but with the warmth of the paper, I think Burlap is the right choice. So now I'm going to add a couple of greens so that I can blend the colors so that the decoupage paper looks like it's just seamlessly painted onto the furniture. And be sure to check out the description box below because I will leave links to all of the products down there. I'm just dabbing on the colors. I'm using Weeping Willow, English Ivy, and Collard Greens as my green color. The Collard Greens matches so perfect with that really dark green on there. Then I'm going to use Kernel Mustard to add some warmth to mix with the Cobblestone. And then I even dab some Mason-Dixon Gray, which is like a grayish purple to the top, because you can see in that paper there is a little bit of this purplish cool color. So I add some of that at the end. And each time I'm just dabbing it on. When I'm working on the roses, I add a little bit of apricot and tea rose. I add a little bit of Florida orange, because you can see it in the roses, a little bit of muscadine wine. But this is how I do it, and I just keep adding and taking away and just experimenting. But every time I do it, I'm doing it in that little dabbing motion. It's just a stipple. And just so you can get an idea, there's one side that's done and the other is not. As you can see, that trim is not in good condition at all. I gave it a light sanding with some 220 grit sanding sponge, and then I'm adding my Cobblestone. Now to make the gorgeous details on the sides pop, I'm using drop cloth. and I'm going to dry brush that on. So you just load a little bit on your brush and you wipe it off on a dry towel. Then I'm doing a light dusting over those raised details. The paint is going to be left right on those raised details, but it's not going to get in all over the piece. And that's what dry brushing is. If I had wet my brush or used a wet brush, it would probably go all over, the entire area. But just because the brush is dry, there's not a lot on it, that paint isn't going to get everywhere. It's just going to stay on those raised details. Now bear with me here. Something just was not looking right to me. It felt a little bit off. I loved the warmth in the paper on the sides, but on the front, I felt like it was getting a little bit too cool. So I added a little bit of cobblestone so that I can mix in the color burlap. Burlap is very close to cobblestone, but it's a little bit on the warmer side. So I needed to reblend that side to add a little bit more warmth from the paper. And then I did end up covering what I dry brushed and on the sides with burlap. And to do this, I'm using a ragging technique. Because I already love the blend that I did, I just wanted to add a little bit of warmth. I was able to add the cobblestone and then the burlap on top of that, use my water mister to get it wet, and then use my rag to get most of it off so you could still see that blend that I did underneath, but it keeps that warmth from the new color. And a ragging technique is really wonderful. If you're having trouble with your blend or you think something doesn't look right, try just dabbing on with your rag. It's just a subtle look. It'll change it subtly. And that's what I'm looking for here. And once I finish that, now I'm going to use that burlap and just cover both of those sides that I had already painted with the cobblestone. Then I saw this little piece that I thought I could get away with camouflaging. The piece is missing on the other side and it just wasn't working. So of course I tried to blend it in, but I didn't like how the sides were that beige color and the bottom was green. It just wasn't, it wasn't marrying. They weren't going along right together. So I ended up painting that bottom with the burlap, and now everything goes together. So here I am, and I'm covering the cobblestone on the top, on the sides, and as you can see, it's getting warmer, and that's what I really wanted. So not every project goes the way I want to right off the bat, and that's okay. So here I am again, and now I did want to do that drop cloth dry brushing. I loved it. So here, now when my burlap is dry, I just go ahead and I dry brush one more time so we can make those details pop. And now my next step is to add 2 coats of Dixie Belle's clear coat in satin. I want there to be a nice satin finish on this. I'm not adding it to the top yet, but before I do our next step, I want to make sure that I've sealed it twice. Now I'm using the brown glaze, and this is going to go in all the creases of the details. So it goes on so easy. It's so simple to use. You just brush it on like it's paint, brush it over the whole area, and then take a dry towel or cloth or rag, and you're going to wipe down all the raised details. And then the glaze is going to stay in all those creases and crevices, but it's also going to sort of deepen the color of the burlap just a tiny bit. And here, so you can see one side is done with the glaze and the other is not. Makes a huge difference, and look at how those details really do pop. Now for the top of the piece, I'm using my 220 grit sanding pad, and I'm just giving it a nice scuff sand. Because I stripped the top off, it's pretty even. I don't even need to use like some major sanding. I'm just going to do a light sanding, and then I'm going to seal it with Dixie Belle's Gator Hide. Gator Hide is an amazing sealer for high traffic areas. So you would want to use it for like a kitchen table or a nightstand, a side table, tabletops, because people put glasses and things on there. And any outdoor furniture, because it's also water resistant. I love this, especially on raw wood. It just brings it back to life. It's a really great sealer. You remember what it looked like when we started, and here it is today. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you hit that like button and let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll see you next time.